Today on Tricro Studios, we do a high gain amp shootout between the Peavey 6505 Plus and the Marshall JCM 900 4100, so the 100 watt high gain dual reverb. Now, we'd like to reiterate here that this is a high gain amp shootout, so you're not going to hear any cleans, you're not going to hear any breakups or any polka music or anything. This is just high gain geared towards metal. Now, we'd like to note here that the 6505 Plus is not boosted, whereas the Marshall JCM 900 is boosted with an Ibanez TS9. But I do have two sound samples for you today, the first of which is in drop C, and that's in a more balanced type EQ setting, whereas the second of which is in drop C sharp, and that is in a more scoop type setting. Alright, so there you go. There are the two sound samples for the high gain amp shootout between the Peavey 6505 Plus and the Marshall JCM 800 4100, the 100 watt high gain dual reverb. So the one that everyone hates. For those of you who may ask, this 6505 Plus, definitely not the 6505 II, look at it. But this is made in USA, not the made in China. I usually get asked that. I don't think there's any difference other than where it's made. But it's at this point in the video where I like to go over kind of what I've gained from doing a shootout like this. Both of these amps are notoriously dark. Both of these amps can be taken as quite polarizing. The reason I say that is a lot of people don't like the 6505 Plus, which I don't know how, I don't know why. But some people don't like it, I guess because it's a little dark. And just everyone and their dog hates the JCM 900 who hasn't played one. Just a little bit of a hint, crank the volume, it's a great amp. But what I did gather here was the 6505 Plus seems a little more dark than the JCM 900. The JCM 900, and for those of you who may be curious, my presence control is all the way back at about 10 o'clock. So there's some people may be thinking, because there's definitely a lot more high end in the JCM 900, which can actually get you to believe that there's a little more gain in the JCM 900. But you may be thinking that, oh, maybe I cranked the high end and the presence, which is definitely not the case. My treble's actually at noon, and again, my presence is sitting at about 10 o'clock. So you may have found in the recording that you heard quite a bit of what may seem like low end and low mids, and then a mixture of kind of a little more high end mids and a lot of high end in that recording. One thing I do want to note, the only thing that I really had a little bit more emphasis on, I guess you would say, for the JCM 900 was the bass control. The bass control, I find it can come across that it's lacking in the low end, so you would generally increase the bass. And it is quite favorable, especially when you're using an Ibanez TS9 in a boost type setting. The 6505 Plus, in a recording type setting, the low end, you would tend to dial that back a little more, especially here. If you may or may not be able to see, that sitting at about 1030, whereas my high end is increased a little more. That is sitting at about 230. That's generally where I do like my 6505 Plus with the high end. And in regards to the mids, I generally do have that sitting at about 1 o'clock. That's really what I kind of gained and gathered. I do find that the 6505 Plus does sound a little more favorable, with a little less of the mid control in there, in a recording setting at least. So it definitely came across a little better in the scoop type setting. As a quick note here, anything that I've been doing with Peavey, I do want to note the pots here are definitely of a different quality, is what I'd like to say. The reason I say that is once every year and a half, 2 years, you really want to pull the chassis out and you want to hit that with some contact cleaner and work that contact cleaner in. Because what ends up happening is those pots do tend to get a little dirtier than most other amps. Same with actually the EVH series, which are not Peavey. But that's kind of when you get the scratchy pots, when you kind of turn thing and you hear. But what I find on Peavey amps, I have 5 Peavey amps, and the 6505 Plus is the only one that hasn't happened on for me yet. But when you go to turn things, you actually end up losing power. So it can actually sound like, you're turning up the gain or you're turning up the volume, and then all of a sudden everything cuts out. Or it just sounds very, very wrong. So that takes about a half hour, so it's not that big of a deal, and contact cleaners are rather cheap. It takes a half hour to do it, and you just clean it and work everything in. And I also want to reiterate here the JCM 900, 4100, the dual reverb, which is the one that everyone kind of hates. I actually use it as a secret weapon because I don't understand. I have a JCM 800 as well, so I get it. I know that the JCM 800 mids and everything. But if you turn the amp up, you're going to actually get some good sounds out of it. Like the volume for like master for channel B, that's actually sitting at about 230. So I find like between 230 and 3, that's when the amp starts to open up a little more and you kind of get a little more grunt and growl out of it. I mean, 100 watt heads at a bedroom level is, there's nothing wrong with that if you want to have the 100 watt head, but a lot of amps, they don't actually start to open up until you start really increasing the volume. And for me, I have a separate room that's treated that has my cabinets and my mics in there, so I can crank that without, like, you know, having bleeding ears. But I've talked way too much, and it's gonna annoy me when I edit this video. But I thank you guys for watching, and I do consider myself very, very lucky to own both of these amps and all the gear that I do own, and they're both very, very good choices. The JCM 900, people will scoff at you, but as long as you're turning up the volume, they'll also go, "Are you sure that's the amp that you're using?" Thanks for watching.